Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Congressional Cemetery. I'm going to be your docent today, and let me start by telling you a little bit about who we are and how long we've been here. We've been here since 1807, and we started out with 4.5 acres, which most of it were over there to my right. When we walk by, I'll point again to tell you where. And we were the only cemetery in the city that was actually planned for by Pierre L'Enfant, who planned our city. We started out to be the churchyard for Christ Church, which is at 6th and G Street southeast. And excuse me, I'm a little nervous. So we'll talk about that. If you visit Washington, you should also visit Christ Church. We are now overseen by a board, including Christ Church. We're a historic site. And we're in the National Trust. And today I'm going to do the introductory tour and show you some of the people that I think are interesting and important and fun to know about. So let's go. All right. So as you can see, that we don't have the other wonderful part about this is that you can still be an individual. And you can see the many different types of headstones we have and the different sayings on them. Makes it all very interesting. And I'm going to show you this table down here. In Victorian times, people used to come, in Victorian times and in the Spanish tradition, people came to the cemetery to talk about, or to celebrate it's the Day of the Dead for Spanish people. We still have a family who comes here and has a picnic at this table here. So that's good. And I would encourage you on a cooler day to come and sit there and under that wonderful tree and have a luncheon or something. So this obelisk is right here commemorates Ruth Ann Overbeck, who is a local historian. And she has a fun epithet on her grave. It says, "Look it up." It's hard to see. It's in the same tone as the granite. So you have to look hard. It says, "Look it up." And so she started a history project here in the neighborhood. So let's keep going. As we're walking along, you can see that there are dogs here. I'm going to tell you why the dogs are here. Again, it's part of what makes us special, I think. And there's a reason that they're here, and we like it that they're here. Morning.
Morning.
So notice the stones you'll see some of the stones on graves as we go by, the headstones. That's generally thought of as a Jewish tradition to let people know that you visited. But I have a theory of my own when we get down to another grave. It's my theory, so we'll see if it's true. It all has to do with how we're all interconnected with one another. Okay, we're going up here. We're turning to the right. And let me walk with being filmed, so this is a new experience for all of us. So pretty soon in a couple of rows, we're gonna turn to the left and head for the grave of Matthew Brady. Some of these stones are old, and the other thing I like to talk about is the materials that are used. This is marble, and if you can touch it, it's very, very rough. Marble is thought of as being a very tough stone, but actually it's pretty delicate and doesn't react well to acid rain and so on and so forth. So that's kind of what's going on. we can see here what's going on in Venice when they're mourning the loss of some of their wonderful statues. So let's. So right here, this is the family plot of Matthew Brady, and everybody who's ever had a $5 bill, they can see one of Matthew Brady's actually one of his photographs. It's his picture of Lincoln that's on the $5 bill. But he also, I want to show you something else too. There's a little typo on his actually first stone, but so this is his original stone, and you'll see it says 1895, and the newer stone, which is granite and still feels wonderful, smooth and everything, says 1896. That was actually replaced by friends of Matthew Brady. Anyway, back to who he was. He was. So we're heading over here to this china closet, which is such an exceptional headstone in all of its own. But it's a good way to talk about the rebirth of the cemetery. Headstone, and it's a model after her very own china closet, and those are her remains inside. You have to look closely to see them. But here's what I want you to see: a bullet hole. And in the late 90s, this cemetery, as we're walking, you can see how beautiful and neat it is. In the late 90s, the cemetery was up to your waist in grass. People were doing drugs. It was a terrible place to be. And someone recognized the terrible loss that we were viewing and got together the dogs to, they made people pay for the dog to walk their dogs in here. And many were willing to do that because so many people realized what a treasure this actually is. So since that moment in the late 90s, the grass has been cut, everything has been well kept. We have visitors from all over the world, and it's a wonderful place to be, to learn your history, to wander around, to have lunch, and so on. So we'll go on.
Sounds great.
Sorry for the silence, but we're just going over here to this beautiful statue. This is our only bronze in the cemetery, and it's in memory of a little girl who had many impairments. She was very disabled, and so her parents, when they wanted to honor her, and she looked at her finger a lot, so the artist or the sculptor put a butterfly on her finger, so to make it look beautiful. And you can see around the corner her little shoes are there that she had to wear, and so on. So they made something beautiful out of. They made a beautiful memory and in a beautiful material.
I've never noticed the shoes there before. That's really cool.
I love those shoes.
Yeah.
So maybe this is our most famous resident. I'm not sure. You can choose. As we go through, you can choose. So this is John Philip Sousa, right here. This is his family plot, and if you've ever been to a United States, if you've ever watched the fireworks or almost any American celebration, you've heard of John Philip Sousa March. I'm sure of it. The Washington Post March is probably his most famous. So this is his family plot. And he was born in this neighborhood next to Christ Church. Actually, his home was right next to Christ Church. And he was married. He was born, christened there, married there, buried there.
Wow.
And his birthday is November 6th. So on November 6th, first I have to tell you the story. So he was a bad boy and tried to run away from the circus. And his father was in the Marine Corps. So he enrolled him in the Marine Corps at 13. And the rest is, as we know, history. So on November 6th, which is his birthday, that cave down there, there's a Marine barracks here, several blocks away, but relatively close. The Marine band comes into that gate, marches in full dress uniform. They stand there, play several of his songs, and then march ceremoniously off. I invite you to come to this. It's quite a ceremony. It's on our website. It's really a wonderful thing to see.
And sometimes there's birthday cake.
And sometimes there's birthday cake. Yes. Yes. So, and actually schools, well, right now things are a little different, but schools come and honor him and play a song. So it's always lively around here. So now we're heading down to a totally different subject. We're going back down. We're going to see one thing, which is the tallest monument in the cemetery, and one of the more interesting ones. But then we're going to double back here, and I'm going to show you something very interesting. So this is the grave, this black grave here, or stone here, is the stone to Thomas Lantos, who was the only Holocaust survivor to serve in Congress. And, we started talking about the stones to remember. Well, he definitely was Jewish, but again, I'm just going to keep you in limbo and talk about something else a little later. The most wonderful, he was an incredibly interesting and brave man, but one of the, his epithet on the side here is something I always look at. Come around and take a look. The veneer of civilization is paper thin. We are its guardians, and we can never sleep. I just love that. So here we go down to it's called the Arsenal Monument. I'll give you a little heads up while we walk down there. And it's to honor 21 young Irish women who were making munitions for the Civil War. And it's right over there. It's famous. The Irish ambassador has been here to look at it and kind of honor it and so on. Okay, just come this way to the right. See, let's just touch this for a minute. This is granite, and it's smooth to feel. it will never sugar. It's such a way harder material. So if you're thinking about materials, you might consider some of the things we're talking about. This is the Arsenal Monument. We can see the dogs walking in front by me. We're going to turn right, walk down Freedom Path. In the spring, this is alive with beautiful pink cherry blossoms. It's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. We're heading down this way. And I'll kind of tell you when we get to the end why it's called the Freedom Walk. Are there people asking questions?
Not at this moment.
Okay.
You've been so informative, they don't have any questions.
Okay. But I would welcome questions because that keeps tours interesting, because we have lots of people to research whatever you want. If something occurs to you, you could always write to the cemetery and ask that question. It helps us all learn. So what we're coming to looks a little bit like an anomaly, but I'll explain it as we get closer. So I don't know if you can see the bottom of what we're starting to get near to. It's a totem pole. And it was carved by the Lumbee Indians in the Pacific Northwest. And the master carver is Jewel Praying Wolf James. And it was brought here after 9/11. And I think it was here, started out to be temporary. But I hope it's not. So it's full of symbolism. The timber on the side facing, and you can see it facing west, is war. Facing east is peace. There's different symbols. This is a male symbol. This is a female symbol. Mr. Praying Wolf James needed to put a turtle on this section of the totem pole, and it turns out that our local Indian tribe is Piscataway, and that's their tribal symbol.
They both have a turtle symbol.
Yes. So he was driven, if you will, to make put a turtle on it. So it's local in its own way too. Even though it's come from the Pacific Northwest, it belongs here too. So let's go through. Whoops.
Yeah, I don't think we're supposed to do that. If we go backwards, is it okay?
Well, I want to talk about what we just did. So I did that purposely. So if you're following my tour, I did this tour and I marched on through as I just did. And when I got to the end of the tour, a woman called me aside and told me that I had violated sacred space. So, as I said, I did that purposely so that you would know, if you came to visit us personally, you might want to walk around. Ever since then, I always post, if I'm giving a personal tour, I say that before we walk through. but this time I made you walk through with me just to see. So now we're heading to the grave of Belva Ann Lockwood, who is one of my heroes, I guess. Not I guess, I know. She's right there. They're covered by cedar trees. And that's purposeful. Again, in funerary processes, cedar has its own smell and was not attractive to bugs or anything like that. So people did plant cedar around graves as a regular basis. So this is Belva Ann Lockwood, and she was the only woman to run on a national ticket for president, but that was before the suffrage movement was ratified. So I just call her totally unstoppable. Georgetown and Howard University law schools. Finally, National Law School accepted her, and we think that that's now part of the GW Law School. So she was not allowed to study because she would be a distraction. But she was not allowed to take classes because she would distract the men. So she studied alone, passed all the exams, then they would not give her a diploma. So Ulysses S. Grant finally signed her diploma. And then she, as I said, she ran for president, got 4,000 votes. Another interesting thing, because that was before, so 4,000 men must have voted for her.
Right.
So I think that's fascinating.
Because she couldn't even vote for herself.
She couldn't even vote for herself. So she was cheered on by the greats of the women's movement, Susan B. Anthony and so on and so forth. So Grant signed her diploma. Then she couldn't practice before the court. So that was another push. Finally, it was Rutherford. She was. So let's move on. So we're going back to the path there, and we're going to turn right again. If people were here, I'd be saying careful, careful, because it's a little bit uneven walkway. These things fun, in a way. Most of this is totally true. Some of it we introduced as being a rumor. So I don't know if you can see it, but it's that little kind of bluish obelisk over there. Would you like me to walk over there?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay.
Ooh, careful.
So as Sarah said, it is hollow, but the good part of it that I see is look how nice the definition is. It hasn't faded after all these years. What's the date?
1886.
1886. Look at that. Look how perfect easy it is to read. And as I said, maybe we can go along with Sarah thinking that that's where you hid your boots.
Yeah. I told you, just screw off the little nameplate right there, stick it in, screw it back on.
Okay.
Tell people you left it at the McLeods.
Right. So only one company in the United States made them, and they didn't make them for very long at all. They were originally called white bronze, but it's actually in zinc. And the whole practice was stopped right before the First World War because they needed the alloy for the war. So anyway, I think it's pretty and well defined. And zinc is kind of a poisonous alloy. So I think it's, although lots of roofing is made from zinc, it's everlasting. So we're heading this way. Okay. Here we're going to take a left, and we're heading back down toward the chapel. And when we get to the chapel, I'm going to show you some interesting things on the chapel. So just looking ahead a little bit, you can see that bright Dakota red obelisk there. When we get closer to it, I'll tell you who it is.
I probably would have called it pink.
Huh?
I probably would have called it pink.
Pink. I think it's Dakota red.
I should know the official word.
Well, I don't know that it's official, but that's what I think it is. So we can see the name on it is French. One of the other interesting things about Congressional Cemetery is that there's so many parts and pieces in which Lincoln touched. I didn't say it when we were down at the Arsenal Monument, but it was President Lincoln that led a funeral procession down to bury those young women. This Benjamin Brown French was his commissioner of buildings. And during Lincoln's second inaugural, there was some suspicion that Booth was there at that time. And actually, he was kind of in one of the porticos of the Capitol where he was about to be sworn in. And nobody knew, of course, at that time who he was. So French just kind of pushed him away. So
he should get credit for saving Lincoln's life.
At least once.
At least one time.
Yes. Yes. So that's another interesting story. So the other one we're heading up to is Humphreys Graves. There's two brothers, and I'll point them out when we get there. One was a Union soldier and one was a Confederate soldier. But their family must have made peace with it because they're both here. So see the Humphreys? That's Andrew Humphreys there. It was a very ornate one. And that covered vase means kind of end of life. Your life is cut short. Your life is... So that's kind of it's a little symbolic, typical. And I think we can see others like it as through the cemetery. So this is Andrew, and he was an engineer with the Union Army. And then over here, this round one is Joshua. Who was in the Confederate Navy. I don't know if you can you see that?
Must have been a little tense at dinner time.
Must have been a little tense at dinner time. Absolutely. So we're heading toward the chapel, which in terms of the cemetery is on the new side. So I want you to notice those vents up there. Three vents. And there below, these 3 windows. So if you're inside the chapel, there are 3 doors inside the chapel. It was typical, before the religious ceremony, before your burial, it was typical to store the body who was about to be buried in one of those compartments. And of course that was a vent in case there was any odors or anything. It's beautiful inside there. I don't know if we can go in, can we?
It is not good for sound in there.
Okay, all right. But if you come and visit the cemetery, somebody here will let you in and you can see what I'm talking about. It's all pretty interesting how things have evolved. So we're moving on. We're going straight for just a couple of rows here. So these are the cenotaphs, and they stopped being created in 1876. One of the congressmen said they were an atrocity, and he understood why death was so horrible. But for their time, they were very, very modern, and so they're called cenotaphs because means empty tomb. Again, back to funeral practices in the 1800s. Sometimes it wasn't possible to send somebody home to be buried, so sometimes this was kind of a temporary resting place for them. So they're here. There's some big names. John Quincy Adams is over there. Thaddeus Stevens, who was in the Lincoln administration, is there. Several very, very famous people names are there. So we're heading. I just want to show you this to my right, the tall one with the reading on the front, on the mid part of the bottom part of the obelisk. So that's Archibald Henderson, and he was the first commandant of the Marine Corps, which again is in this neighborhood. And there's a rumor that said when the first woman was accepted to the Corps, his picture fell off the wall. I don't know if that's true, but I love to tell stories because it makes it interesting, and it allows me to show you this grave. So we're going to turn down this path, but before we do that, I want to walk up just a couple more steps and show you this gray stone this gray obelisk that we're coming to. So that is a monument to Dr. James Hall, who was Mrs. Lincoln's personal physician, and he was in the hotel tending to Mr. Lincoln. He was not the lead surgeon or anything, but he was there. Dr. Hall was there at her request. So I like to point that out.
Another Lincoln connection.
Another Lincoln connection, yes. Yes. Some are loosely connected and some are less loosely connected. So we're going down here to the public vault. Which is the vault open today, Sarah? No. Okay.
Nope. Sorry.
People feel frightened. When it's open, I allow people to go down there. It's a little bit frightening and a little scary and a little fun all at once. And we have our Halloween, our annual Halloween party, and which, if you're in Washington, you should definitely come to. And, well, assuming that this is all over.
It may look a little different this year.
It may look a little
We're
different.
going to try our best.
Yes. So this is the public vault. And three presidents, again, back to burial practices. Three presidents were buried here. William Henry Harrison, who was here actually a little longer than he was actually in office. He was a big talker, and he got pneumonia during his inaugural speech and died shortly after that. So it was William Henry Harrison, Zachary Taylor, and John Quincy Adams. But I think the most well-known, well, not that those men weren't, but Dolly Madison was here. And it was partly because her son, John Payne Todd, who's also buried in the yard, was a gambler, a drinker, and so on. So when it came time to bury her and or send her back to Montpelier, there was no money to do that. So the Costons there helped raise money, but it was several years before she left the public vault to go back to Montpelier, where she rests now with James Madison. Madison apparently was very, he actually adopted John Payne Todd, but Todd was not a responsible person. I'll just leave it like that. So, okay, we're going to move on down this path and go on to a totally different subject. A little more contemporary. Well, sort of. We're turning right. Some of the dirt you see on the ground there, we had a terrible storm a couple of days ago, and I think some of that dirt kind of washed up over the pathway here. But it'll be cleaned up. We have great groundskeepers and everything. I haven't been able to show you, but I'm sure I will, some graves that have toppled, and because I'd like to talk about that a little bit. Some of the graves that, oh, okay, see those graves over there that look like they've fallen down? We'll walk over to them a little closer. So that could be two reasons. A, the water table here is pretty high because the Anacostia River is right over there. But B, we'll see when we get over there. The pins that holding up those monuments, holding up the stones, were made of wrought iron, and they failed. They actually corroded and failed. So I don't know if we can see them, but that's why those look like that.
And our director of conservation is actually actively cataloging all of those, and she has interns working this summer to restore a lot of these stones.
That's good. Yes, that's good. So, again, it's all about materials. So many things are about materials, but that's what this is about. There's been no vandalism, no just getting old kind of thing, and materials failing. So we're heading over here, down the path a little bit. So we're heading down just a couple of steps, and then we're gonna turn right. But up here, I want to show you another grave. Again, not spectacularly famous, but interesting. It's kind of how history all kinds of pieces together in its own puzzle way. So this monument, you can see it kind of rolled over. We'll get to it, and I'll turn and go there. So this is the grave of John A.W. Clairvaux. A stands for Alexandria, W stands for Washington. He apparently was born on a ferry coming from Virginia to Washington. So that's what the AW stands for. And he was a detective. He was a DC detective in the Lincoln investigation after the shooting. So there's that. So we're getting to the end of the path and then turning right. So this fenced-in grave up here, fenced-in plot, is J. Edgar Hoover. And we are told to make sure everybody knows that this was not paid for by the FBI, but friends of the FBI. And this is actually his family plot. So his whole family is there. And it's beautiful, and it's kept by friends of the FBI. And he was such a controversial figure, as we know. But here he is. And I think you can, there's, again, it was dedicated by a former FBI agent. So down here, the cemetery kind of has neighborhoods in its own strange way. So down here, we can't see it quite yet, but there's a little headstone. Again, it's Dakota red granite for Clyde Tolson, who was J. Edgar Hoover's partner. And then right there, Clyde Tolson. And this is one of the more interesting monuments to me. It's fraught with such different emotions. So it's the gravestone of Leonard Matlivich, who won the Congressional Medal for bravery, then was discharged from the service for being gay. Those triangles, the upside down triangle, is a Nazi symbol for homosexuality. And when there's lots of people here, I ask how they read his saying, how they interpret his saying.
Could you read it for us?
Yes. When I was in the military, they gave me a medal for killing 2 men and a discharge for loving 1. That's such an emotional saying. I just love it. It's upsetting that those are Nazi symbols, but I'm sure Mr. Matlivich chose that. I'm sure that whoever designed this, it would have been okay with, the whole design would have been acceptable to him. So it's called Never Again. And again, this I'm just rereading this again in terms of our present circumstance. If you have done nothing to erase unjust prejudice with wherever it exists, best weep and for you and your country. So it's germane right now, I think, too, as we go through these times that we're going through. This is Gator Swan, he's also a gay serviceman. He just wanted to be near, when he dies, he wants to be near Leonard Matlivich. So he's staked out his place to be. Interesting stuff.
Sometimes this is called gay corner.
Sometimes, okay, yes. I don't know, personally, I don't know whether that's, offensive to people or...
That's what our director calls it.
Okay. Okay, well then I'll call it that.
I think it's affectionately known as
Okay. I haven't done that, just because, not for any reason, just because. So we're going to do a 100% about face. Before we get to where I'm going now, somewhere in this area, and I'm not sure where, is the grave of John Totem, who was the bartender at the Star Cafe, who served Booth while he was waiting to get in Ford's Theater to do the Lincoln assassination. And somewhere in here, it's over there. Okay. And it's an unmarked grave, is that right?
Oh, well, maybe he's with his family then, because there's a culpable.
Okay, then okay. Yes. I don't think he has a personal grave.
Family plot.
But it's a family plot, yes. So we're leaving in the Lincoln stuff. So in just a couple of steps, we're going to turn right, excuse me. And we're heading down to the Hall Sisters. So they are going to be those two angels there. An interesting depiction of them, I think. We're having lots of work done, as you can see. It's ongoing. In a place this big, it's ongoing. The maintenance is ongoing.
And this, I believe, is actually one of our adopt-a plots. So anybody who's really into gardening can come and adopt a plot of a grave that maybe the family isn't here anymore, or they moved away, so there's no one here to take care of the plot.
Or maybe they just love who these women were.
That's true. So you can come and adopt a plot. So
Okay.
Plot is adopted.
So this is the Hall Sisters, and in the yard there are 9 unrelated men whose funerals they paid for. They ran. So I see Elizabeth has that scarf on again. For years and years she had a scarf around her neck, and people in the cemetery took it down and then it would reappear. Finally we left it, and it, I think, eventually rotted off. I see that something like it is back. But they ran a very high class bordello here where the National Museum of Indian History is. And so where John Hooker's men would frequently go. That's how the name Hooker got to be. So there they are. As I said, a total about face from the other things we've talking about, but interesting nonetheless.
And when they were doing archaeology to make them,
They found champagne corks and fine china, and yes, so
it was a high-class establishment.
high-class establishment. And I want to keep an eye on the scarf again. I think it used to be that they stopped taking the scarf, that we, the cemetery, stopped taking the scarf down because we were afraid somebody was climbing up there and would get hurt. So we left it alone for a long time, and it finally it either brought it off of her or vanished, or blown away, but it hasn't been back until just now. So now we're heading down to Tajay, who's an Apache, who's the son of Cochise, the Apache chief. And when we get down there in the shade, I'll talk about it a little bit more. So here we're going right over here to Tajay. And he, as I said, was the son of Cochise, an Apache chief, but he was duped along with other Indian dancers into coming here. The man who duped them was trying to come east to get married, and he didn't have enough money, so he put on Indian shows to make money to keep his travel coming east alive. When they got here, Tajay got pneumonia and died, and was given quite a funeral, as I understand it. A glass coffin, silver handles on the coffin, and so on. But the thing I like to talk about, again, is the rocks. Again, this is my theory, but that's in the shape of his body. And when it was newer, you could see it a little more defined. You could see it very much as a body. So one always wonders where traditions start. I'm not sure that there's one place that they do. However, when I look at this and I look at the stones on other graves as remembrance, I wonder. I haven't been able to find any literature or anybody who's spoken to that, but it just seems like it could be. And I'll leave that up to whoever is listening. I'll leave that up to you. So we're going to move on, and as we walk past this brick wall, I was here one day giving a tour, and there were several Chinese Americans here. We'll go up a little bit farther. Whoops, lunchtime. Okay, so we're looking at this brick wall in front of us, which is the end of the cemetery. And one day when I was here giving a tour, there were several Chinese Americans here, and they were obviously having a ceremony of some sort by this wall. So I wondered aloud what they were doing, and they were having a Qingming ceremony, which is you come and you honor your ancestors. We had a chat after they finished their ceremony. They're relatively positive there are no ancestors there, that they were exhumed and sent back to China. But still an interesting thing, and it just shows you the breadth of this cemetery and the different ethnic groups and that have been and are here. So now we're heading way over there to the grave of Elbridge Gerry. Some of the things along here aren't quite as interesting as some of the things we've seen, but we can talk about materials and how they feel, and so when we walk along here with groups, we have to, this is kind of interesting, crocheted rock. It's just interesting to come to a place like this and wander around. You don't need to have your own history book. We have brochures at the beginning, at the gatehouse, and you can choose a tour that's interesting to you. We have a tour for American Indians. We have an introductory tour, which is sort of what I'm doing now. We have a women's tour.
Chinese American.
Right. So I'm looking for shade, but I don't think it's existent.
I think we're just gonna power through.
Right. Okay, we don't have much farther to go. There we go. Lovely shade. So where we're going, you can just see the top of it now. It's a very ornate urn. And that will be the headstone of Elbridge Gerry. So this is the tomb of Elbridge Gerry, and he's the only signer of the Declaration of Independence here. His remains are here, and he was vice president under James Madison. So you might recognize his name. When he was governor of Massachusetts, he drew the voting lines so that they look like a salamander. And so that's where we get gerrymandering from. So, interesting story. Okay, let's move on. We're heading over here under the tree. To the grave of William Thornton, who was a designer of the Capitol. He was actually a physician by training, but he never actually practiced medicine. He and his wife were the bon vivants of Washington at the time. However, his one kind of foray into medicine was deciding that he could reanimate George Washington. I love this story. So he was going to warm Washington's body and put a bellows in his throat, puff up his lungs, and he called it reanimating him. Mrs. Washington declined. Luckily. So there we go. Then our last stop will be what I think is our famous unmarked grave.
Conservation work going on right over here.
I see that.
They're working on resetting the stones, drilling new holes for
That's the Symington.
I think it's the Emery family.
Emery. Okay. Oh, Symington is next to it.
Yeah. So they have some that are still in progress, but they've been working really hard to get them set back up again.
Right. Right. So here's the famous unmarked grave that I promised you. I wonder if you recognize the last name, Harold. Does that ring a bell to anyone?
He's not looking familiar.
Okay. So in one of these graves is Davy Harold, one of the Lincoln assassins. And his parents chose not to never name him on the headstone so that his grave would not be vandalized. So he's here, David Harold. And thank you, everybody. This kind of concludes my tour. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd love comments. We'd love comments. And come and visit us in person. Bye now.